been going to church since before I can remember, and church for me is always like a buffet. There's always lots of things to inspire you, and when you go, you never know exactly what it's going to be. One day it might be the reading, or the next day it might be music, like that beautiful piece that was just played. Another day it might be the Sunday talk, or a prayer, or fellowship afterwards. It's always something else you can find to feed you. And so I'm grateful today for being able to bring another dish to the buffet today. From last month, I brought you a dish, and here's a new one for today. So I hope it's as tasty as the last one was, because I got some good reviews, and I'm grateful for those kind words that people have said. So we've got a lot of material to cover today, so we'll get right at it. The book that we're using is the Metaphysics 1 book. It's online. You can download it and read it yourself. We've got about 30 pages of that book to cover today. This is the second unit of that book. The first unit was God, and this one is mankind. So what this booklet was produced as was a correspondence course that then it basically pulls teachings from Charles Fillmore and then has some commentary. So I've pulled some of that. Obviously, we won't get to cover everything that's in there. I'd invite you to read it for yourself. But here's my highlights of what we have in there and what we can learn from the concepts that Charles Fillmore developed and rediscovered from the original teachings. So last month I put up this slide. For those of you that weren't here last month, you're welcome to read that. I'm not going to read it again. For those of you that were here, you can just skip over that one. The video is also on YouTube, so you can watch that as well. What is metaphysics and metaphysics Bible interpretation? Basically, it's recognizing that what we see in the world is not reality. What we see in the world is a manifestation of an underlying substance. And so metaphysical Bible interpretation looks at the stories as stories of how we can expand our consciousness into Christ consciousness. One of the things that we have a long history of is the concept of knowing yourself. And that is one of the essential things in unity that we develop. And what we say in unity is self-knowledge is the true prelude to Christ consciousness. Without genuine self-knowledge, other knowledge often becomes a kind of clutter of the mind. One of the most effective ways we gain greater self-knowledge is to realize that you have a dimension of your mind that is even greater than your thinking self. I believe that our current culture elevates, I don't know where that came from. Maybe that was an exclamation point. Yeah. I believe our current culture elevates the thinking mind above everything else. They kind of put a ceiling on who we are as humans by saying that our thinking mind is our most developed part of ourself. And in unity, we know that is simply not true. That's just a part of us. It helps us function in the world, but it's not really who we are. And so when we talk about who we are, we go to who am I? When you think about who I am or who you are, we can come up with a long list of things. And all of those are less than who we really are. One of the ways that you can start to work at it is to think about the things that you have. I have an arm, but I'm more than my arm, right? I have legs, but I'm more than my legs. So everything that we have, everything that we could name as having, there's something greater than that's having that thing, right? So as we move up and we'll move into higher and higher levels of abstraction, we have to sort out who we really are. So when you say I am, what do you really mean? It has a body, a soul, even a spirit. I have a spirit. That means something greater than me is having that spirit, right? There's some kind of consciousness. Get you. So who is the I am that you are? Well, it's not just your body, right? It's something more than that. It's not just our emotions. Our emotions and body are part of of what we have, but we're more than that. It's not just our thoughts or our mind. We're more than just our thoughts and our body and emotions. And this is the one that we often get tripped up on. We're more than our social roles. So I could say, I am any number of things. I am a male, but that's not really who I am. That's a manifestation of me in the world, right? Which can be translated to I have male genitals. Okay? So all of the social roles that we play, we tend to identify with those. I am a therapist. No, that's not who I am. That's a role that I play. So whatever you've done in your life, whatever achievements you've made, those are all things you still have. Those aren't things you are. Those are social roles that you've taken on. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a son. All of those are roles. So who are you behind all of those roles? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about moving into this I am consciousness. So we're all more than that. Another way to look at it is that the more expansive you get with these different parts of you, the more you move into the unknown. So our bodies are pretty easy to identify. Our emotions are less easy to see or nail down. Our thoughts are even less. Our social roles are defined, but we can't really see them. And our spirit is something beyond that. And what happens with us is we often create a ceiling in our lives of, okay, well, this is me. This is who I am. And what we do is we limit ourselves to something less than what we were created to be. So one of the quotes in this Metaphysics 1 is, one might ask the question, if God is omnipresence, then why do we speak of finding him? The answer is that we do not actually find God, since omnipresence is never absent. But what we must find is our point of contact with his presence, and that can only be within our own consciousness. So each one of us has the task of finding that point of contact with the principle or as we have come to know and use the term God, which we discussed last month. So how do we go about doing that? Well, our work then is all things are in the consciousness, and you have to learn to separate the erroneous from the true, darkness from light. The I am must separate the sheep from the goats. This sifting begins right now and goes on until the perfect child of God is manifest and you are fully rounded out in all your godlike attributes. That's our work. That's what we're here to do. That's what unity has recognized as truth with a capital T, that principle that we also call God. So in this tract, it talks about four-sided consciousness, and it makes some interesting examples with the number 4 and 40 years in the wilderness and things like that. But four-sided consciousness is a balanced state of mind where we begin by coming into an awareness and an ability to manage the 3 parts of our consciousness, and then we move into the 4th part of our consciousness. So this four-sided consciousness, our body gives us the ideas or gives us the experience of sensations, and we learn to manage those. Our emotions give us feelings, and we learn to manage those. Our mind gives us thoughts, and we learn to manage those. And our spirit gives us intuition, and we learn to access that. Because intuition is that point of contact with the presence. When we are in a state of being able to listen to Source speaking to us, and then once we hear Source, then we surrender to Source speaking through us. So intuition, I have a theory about why we ended up calling intuition, or usually refer to it as women's intuition. I think we can have a whole nother talk on that. I was on the women's studies department, so I can see through those eyes in some ways, but I think that term was used to lower the value of intuition and to raise the value of thinking. And that's how we got to where we are now with all of the trouble that we have in the world. So if we elevate intuition and recognize that every one of us can access intuition, it doesn't depend on our genitals, then we can get to a place where we can live spirit into the world and manifest it. So intuition, the natural knowing capacity, inner knowing, the immediate apprehension of spiritual truth without resort to intellectual means, the wisdom of the heart. It is very much surer in guidance than the head. When one trusts spirit and looks to it for understanding, a certain confidence in the invisible good develops. This faith awakens a so-called sixth sense, intuition, or divine knowing. Through the power of intuition, man has direct access to all knowledge and wisdom of God. So, one of the ways that we come to understand intuition and divine principle is to understand the different levels of consciousness that we're subject to as humans. And the tract sets out 3 different levels. So one level of consciousness is what they call consciousness, which is waking awareness. It's what we're all in at this point. We're all in that waking awareness. The tract also talks about the subconscious. The subconscious, according to Unity, is that vast realm between conscious and superconscious, which is the 3rd category. And according to Unity teachings, the subconscious contains all thoughts we have ever thought. Every thought that we ever think goes into our subconscious. And we'll see in a few minutes, can either enhance the subconscious or tear it down. Tear down our consciousness and our ability to manifest Christ consciousness in the world. So I've given you definitions of each of the categories from the tract. I've talked a little bit about each one and kind of already given you a paraphrase of each of those. Consciousness is where we generally get our identity. That's where that social roles comes in a lot. And we say, oh, well, I'm so-and-so. I'm Tom Capshew. I'm not, something more than that. The subconscious, as I said, contains all past thoughts. First, we think consciously, and the thought becomes subconscious, carrying on its work of building up or tearing down according to its character. So if I have a thought that people don't like me, then that goes into my subconscious, and then it starts tearing down my consciousness of how I navigate the world, because it starts doing its work underneath or underground, and I don't necessarily create opportunities to meet people. I don't, it starts to work to tear down my consciousness. And on the other side, if you have thoughts of I'm a wonderful person, and even with my flaws, then you start creating opportunities and your world from that perspective. So the superconscious then is the goal toward which humanity is working. Regardless of appearance, there is an upward trend continually active throughout all creation. The superconscious is the realm of divine ideas. So those of you that were here last month, that's all principle. That's the whole talk last month was superconscious. That's just another name for principle or universal law, that collection of divine ideas. So now, here's the most important point of the whole talk, the part that's in red. The subconscious may be called the sensitive plate of mind. Its true office is to receive impressions from the superconscious and to reproduce them upon the canvas of the conscious mind. Man, however, has lost the consciousness of the indwelling Father as an ever-present reality, has reversed the process and impresses the subconscious from the conscious mind. So what we've begun to do is to feed our subconscious with our thoughts and emotions rather than going in reverse and connecting to source, connecting to the superconscious and pulling those divine ideas into the subconscious that then end up informing and manifesting our life. So I've got a fun little graphic here for you. So the error is we've reversed the order of things. And what we do generally when we're in error thought is we start with the conscious, we move to the subconscious, and we pretty much leave out the superconscious. It's just not part of the equation. The kingdom of God, as we talked about last month, or principle, or the collection of divine ideas, we start with the superconscious. We start with what we know as truth with a capital T. What we know with our intuition is absolutely true. Then we move that into the subconscious and manifest it into our consciousness. That's the order of things. That's divine order. So Jesus talked about this. In fact, one of the examples he gave was when he went to visit Mary and Martha. This is a great example of which direction you're going. Now, as they were traveling along, he entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister called Mary, who was seated at the Lord's feet, listening to his word. But Martha was distracted with all her preparations, and she came up to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone? Then tell her to help me." But the Lord answered and said to her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things, but only one thing is necessary. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her." It's a clear example of which direction. Martha was in the error thought, and Mary was in divine principle, saying, I'm going to tend to the most important thing here. So I have an example of this in our world, or an analogy that I'd like to use, and it's about what has been come to be known as the Deadzone at the mouth of the Mississippi River. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but all of the kind of lighter green and blue around the landmass there is considered a dead zone because of the runoff from the Mississippi River, both sediment and pesticides. All of the effects of man has come down and run out of the Mississippi River. And there's a zone where fish don't live, where plants don't live. It's called the dead zone. So what the analogy is that the landmass is our thoughts, our consciousness. We put our thoughts or our accretions or down into the dead zone, which is the Gulf of Mexico, is our subconscious. So we're feeding our subconscious with our thoughts. So here's what it looks like from water level, the difference. That is how clear a difference there is between the area that's affected by man and the area that is still pristine. So that's what we're doing when we're reversing the order of how we manifest ourselves in the world. If we go from our thoughts and emotions and deposit those into our subconscious, we're creating a dead zone in our subconscious that then informs us of a lot of negative things. Now, before you get too concerned, the good news is that this dead zone is, from an overall perspective, is not nearly as big as it looked on that first slide. In fact, here's the Gulf of Mexico in its totality. The blue in there is the area at risk. The yellow is kind of where the borderline is, and the red is the dead zone. So if the Gulf of Mexico is our subconscious, then the oceans of the earth is the superconscious. And so our job then is to get out far enough into the subconscious, out into the superconscious, where we can access the truth, where we can access who we really are. So the analogy comes full circle when we think about Jesus' concept of the devil. The dead zone is our devil. The dead zone is that area that negatively informs our consciousness, that negatively informs how we manifest in the world. And the devil is the personal ego which has, in his freedom, formed a state of consciousness peculiarly his own. When man lives wholly in the consciousness that personality is built up, he is ruled by the carnal mind, which is the adversary, or Satan. So, how do we move the other direction? How do we reverse the direction of the flow and bring in Christ consciousness? Well, first of all, we've got a way shower, Jesus, who said in John 14:10, "Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you I do not speak on my own initiative, but the Father abiding in me does his works." So this is where we start when we come into unity. Most of us start here. We've got this individual sense of identity with all these roles, with all these thoughts, and we've got a pretty clear boundary of who I am and who God is. And it's often fairly inflated. Our idea of ourselves is pretty big. Our idea of God's pretty small. There's not much difference there. But here's where we are going when we inform ourselves through the superconscious. We get into a place where the me disappears. And this manifestation becomes nothing more than Christ consciousness. This is principle speaking through me to the world. That's the goal. That's where we're headed. And so how do we do that? How do we get there? Well, again, we've got the 3 steps: superconscious coming down into subconscious that comes down into conscious. We've got tools. At Unity, we've got some wonderful tools that help us to access the superconscious. We've got prayer and meditation. Prayer and meditation are both ways to individually get quiet so that you can quiet your mind, quiet your emotions, quiet your body, and begin to listen to that still, small voice inside of yourself that doesn't have to stay small, because when we work at bringing the Christ consciousness into our consciousness, that voice gets louder and louder. and it gets clearer and clearer, and we can hear it instantaneously. That's how we develop that intuition. We've also got solitude. Solitude's a wonderful way to develop your intuition and to tap into superconsciousness. That's what Jesus did. In fact, I'd love to develop a talk that researches every time Jesus had a significant moment in his life. My theory is that before he had that moment, he went into solitude and spent time listening to principle, spent time emptying himself so that he could be filled with spirit. Study is another way, looking at other people's thoughts and ideas and looking for the truth with a capital T in your studies. Another way is engaging with each other. Together, we can help each other to understand where our own error thoughts are so that we can clarify ourselves and come clearer and cleaner and know more of the truth that we can then live into the world. So, spiritual evolution, according to unity principles, in every man the Christ, or Word of God, is enfolded. It is an idea that contains all ideas. Evolution is a result of the development of ideas in mind. What we are is the result of the evolution of our consciousness, and our consciousness is the result of the seed ideas sown in our mind. Therefore, spiritual evolution is the unfolding of the Spirit of God into expression, which is what each of us is all about. So one last way that we can dive into the superconscious and work on our intuition, and that is to use affirmations, which is one of the core things that we do in Unity. And I just put up some that came to mind as I was preparing for this talk. And if you would like, I'd offer you to close your eyes, and as I read the affirmation, see if it rings true in your heart. See if you can access that intuition to feel the truth. I am a manifestation of the creative force of the universe. I hold within me the seed of Christ consciousness. I am the temple of the Most High. I have unlimited access to the incorruptible truth of existence. Nothing can separate me from the creative force of the universe, also called love. So I'd invite you to open your eyes again. You're welcome to discard any of those that didn't feel like truth to you, because you're the only person that can create that connection with the presence. Yeah, exclamation point. And that means I'm done. Thank you.